What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Meko, joined once again by Ryan Matthews. Here to have another really fun discussion. Ryan, the last time we were here together, we were talking heavy on David Montgomery and just how, again, looking at the offensive side of the football, maybe he's been a little overlooked at times, or just not even overlooked on purpose, but just somewhat forgotten in the shuffle of talent that is on the Detroit Lions offense these days. Today, we're going to have a different conversation, slightly about the same topic, but on the other side of the football, centered around Aidan Hutchinson. And I don't mean to say that like Aidan by any means has been forgotten, because I think whenever we start talking about, hey, why the defense could be better, it kind of begins and ends with Aidan Hutchinson in a lot of ways. But I do kind of start to feel like there's a good contingency of the fan base that feel like, well, Aidan has to take it to another level going into year three. And you and I kind of having a conversation before that don't necessarily see that to be the case. And I think one question that we both kind of had is, if there is another level for him to go up to, what does that look like? And so I kind of want to get into this conversation. I guess we can kind of start there. Is when you look at Aidan Hutchinson, do you feel like there's another level that he has to get to, or even that he's capable of getting to at this point in his early career?
Yeah, I think it's a great question to ask. What does that look like? And it's one of my favorite questions when I'm evaluating a player and thinking about what is the next step for them. Well, what does that look like on the field? And I just have to wonder, Meko, with Aidan Hutchinson's superpower truly being his relentlessness. And it's something that truly does separate him from a lot of other players in the NFL, is just his unwillingness to ever let that battery run dry on any down. The guy is in on so many plays. He plays so many snaps, and he just doesn't quit. He is the proverbial Energizer Bunny. Where else can you tap into that into your game, right? And then that's sort of some of the discussion we had, Meko, is, well, if your superpower is just you try harder than anybody else,
Yeah.
what trait does that accentuate? How can you make that pop more in a game and feel more impactful at that edge position? I'm not sure, Meko, if there's an answer to that question. I think that's where we're kind of left being stumped with Aidan.
Yeah, I think if I were to take a guess at it, right, like where I think some fans think he could get better at, because I feel like I'm very critical of Aidan, and it's not. It initially started with, like, I wasn't a big fan of his coming out of Michigan, coming into the league. I wasn't sure that his skill set would necessarily translate, and I was completely wrong on that. Like,
Oh yeah,
and that's
I was wrong
perfectly
too.
Yeah. And so, like, that's part of evaluating talent, right? Like, sometimes you just aren't sure how certain things will translate, but his relentlessness has translated. So the thing that I typically look at, and he got much better at this last year than he did his rookie year, which was having a plan. Because I think his rookie year, we saw him just heavily rely on that relentlessness. And it's like, hey, that's going to help you when you play the Cowboys, because you'll go out there and you'll just try harder than their left tackle and you'll get 3 sacks. Awesome. What are you going to do when you have to go against, a team like the Chiefs or some of these more high powered offenses, or not even high powered, but just consistent offenses? What's the plan there? And I think that becomes the thing with Aidan now going into year 3, is it's maybe not even necessarily, I don't think it's necessarily stuffing the stat sheet more. I think it just becomes, on a down by down basis, does it feel like he's under control? Because being relentless is awesome, but does it feel like from a snap by snap basis, he has a plan, he has a rush plan, that he's using his hands well, that he's taking proper angles? I think it becomes much more focused on the mental side of the game than it ever does become about what he's doing on the stat sheet.
Yeah, and there was a lot to Aidan's game in his rookie year that it did feel like he was building the plane in the air. When it came to rushing the passer, it really felt like, I'm going to throw something at the wall until it sticks. And the plan definitely developed in year 2, Meko. And I think that's where you saw, just even with his superpower being his relentlessness, that plus more of a plan and a year of experience in the NFL really did him wonders. I think the question still remains, though, how does he keep stacking that? And for a guy like Aidan, I'm not going to question whether or not he can keep on building and developing and refining his craft. But a lot of those questions that we had in him for the pre-draft process, in terms of his bend, in terms of his true athleticism when it comes to getting to the passer, those questions still remain, but he is getting better at it. And
Yeah.
you do see that progression from year one to year two, and you see him just getting more technical with his game. And if he can keep playing a mental and relentless football game, he's going to be a very, very good player for a very long time. And I don't want to cheapen Aidan Hutchinson. I don't want to say that he isn't some elite edge rusher that when it's time for him to get a contract, the Lions should think twice about it. No way. Absolutely not. Aidan Hutchinsons do not grow on trees. They
Yeah.
are very unique football players. And Meko, can you think of a guy who being described as someone who's willing to be a student of the game and a guy who just doesn't quit and puts it all on the line for his teammates? Is there another defensive player that you can think of that fits better to a Dan Campbell type football player? I don't know.
That to your point, that grows on trees, that's this young, that again, you got to pick in the draft and now you get to basically nurture him throughout the rest of his career. No, like those players, even if you are drafting at the top of the draft every year, right? Like we just saw it this past draft, how long it took edge rushers to start getting picked, because guys like Aidan Hutchinson, guys like, if you're really high on Will Anderson, like those types of guys don't come around every single year. And when you have one like Hutch, again, even someone like me that is sometimes have been very critical of him, you have to start to appreciate what he does for what the skill set he has. And it starts to, when I say that, I start to very much think of Jared Goff in that regard, even though I think Hutch is probably more so regarded as a top tier player at his position than Jared probably has, or even probably still is, especially if you look at PFF and how they decided to rank their quarterbacks. But I think Hutch is a player that, again, some people may look at and be like, oh, he doesn't have this freakish bend. He doesn't have, this, he's not really good with his hands, or he's not explosive with his hands compared to some players. He's not TJ Watt. He's not Micah Parsons. Like, it becomes a comparative game with Hutch instead of just appreciating what he does well and realizing, dude, if you started to poll the entire NFL, everybody would sign up for an Aidan Hutchinson. Everyone would sign up for a guy that's going to get you anywhere between 10 and 12 sacks a year, because I think that's the window that I think at a minimum that's what you can expect from Hutch at this point in his career. Will he probably have years where he goes beyond that? Probably. But I think for me, that's where I kind of start to push back when people are like, hey, he needs to take it to another level. I sit back and say, what's necessarily wrong with the level he's at right now going into year 3?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the discussion around Aidan Hutchinson for the years to come will be getting into that top 10. And I feel like he did make a step to enter that top 10 conversation as far as edge defenders last season. When you're in that realm, you're talking about a guy who, there's another 22 teams in the league that would love to have Aidan Hutchinson.
Yeah.
And the thing with the Lions right now, Meko, the discussion everybody wants to have is, well, the Lions need to get somebody and put him opposite of Aidan Hutchinson. So you start thinking about the NFL, they want 64 edge rushers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody wants 2 guys who can get after the quarterback. Now, that's not a realistic thing, just like with, talking about Jared Goff and maybe the conversations in terms of like just how high are they at their respective positions, because – well, but even with quarterback, right? There aren't 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So I think it's an interesting connection that you kind of drew there between Hutch and Goff. The thing that stands out the most to me, though, about Goff is with that relentlessness, you wonder, well, where's an area he can improve that he's lacking in right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a little bit about the pass rush plan. The thing to me is, he had 12 missed tackles according to Pro Football Focus last year, and that was I think he was tied for 4th among edge defenders in that statistic. I'm not even concerned about that number coming down, because if that number comes down, it means that he's not playing as quote unquote recklessly, and that is working against Meko what we kind of determined to be his most valuable trait as a player. Do you really want that player to go from 12 and turn it down to 9? I don't think so. I think I want Aidan Hutchinson always playing at 12, no matter what snap it is, no matter what game it is, because that's just how he plays the game. I don't want him to make any concessions or make any changes about he approaches, each and every down when he plays in the NFL.
No, 100%. And I think if we start to see his missed tackles go down, like again, to your point, do we start to see another metric like pressures go down? Like maybe is he being more overly disciplined, right, in some of his pass rushes instead of
Sure.
realizing, like Dan Campbell talked about this when asked about Hutch, I think it was last week, and he brought up quality pressures. If Hutch is creating quality pressures, and yes, maybe that results into a missed tackle here and there, but it results in a sack or a tackle for loss for someone else, still he's still doing his job at a high level. That's why it's like going back to what I was saying earlier. It goes beyond the stat sheet. It may not get tallied the proper way, even with someone like PFF that they try to go beyond and have these advanced metrics. It may not necessarily show up in a way that resonates, but when you watch enough football and you watch this team consistently from week to week, you start realizing, okay, this is how Hutch impacts the game. Like again, drawing this parallel back to Jared Goff, it may not be the sexiest form of quarterback play that you may see when you're watching Jared Goff, but it's effective. It's the thing that allowed this team to win a division and win 2 playoff games. The same thing is very true with Hutch, and I think it's going to require fans to kind of change this mindset of, okay, if he's going out there and he's just impacting the game week in, week out, whether he gets a sack is like just like the cherry on top. If he's coming out of like every single game getting 2 sacks a game, awesome. If he doesn't, but he generated 8 pressures and that generated 6 sacks for the team as a whole, Aidan did his job.
Yeah, he did his job. And that's something that this coaching staff, that's their mantra, accountability and doing things for the guy next to you. And I think that's an interesting place to take the conversation because, as I mentioned earlier, Meko, everybody's been hard up for another guy opposite of Aidan Hutchinson as far as an edge rusher. And there's people who are still holding out hope for James Houston, and he very likely could. An injury so early in the season last year really derailed the kind of momentum that he had built up. You get a guy like Marcus Davenport, who is worth a flyer as far as a lotto ticket, a guy who loads of potential and has shown ability at the NFL level. Just injuries, right? The greatest ability, as always, is availability. The addition that the Lions made, though, with DJ Reader, I think is going to be so, to your point, Meko, about guys doing their jobs and opening up opportunities for other players around them to make plays. I am so excited for what DJ Reader is going to unlock in Aleem's game, in Hutch's game, in the linebackers game, in their ability to just move to the football and make plays. So as far as a sack total, I think I could totally see Hutch getting up to 12, 13, maybe 14. Who knows, Meko? Like he could have a splash season. He can work on his game infinitely. He can look great. There's something to that number, though, that's really going to be to DJ Reader's credit. And not taking away any credit from Hutch, but I'm saying that like once you get players who are talented in position and you start surrounding those positions with more talent, look what happened to Alex Anzalone, Meko. It was the first guy that everybody wanted to run out of town. And then now that he's got some players around him, they love when they see that blonde hair fly into the football.
100%. And I think to that point that you're making about DJ Reader, it's a testament to his play that will open up opportunities to Aidan Hutchinson where maybe you now have to be more selective as an offensive play caller of like who you want to double. Because you can sit there and look at Hutch and be like, hey, that's their main guy for sack production, so we're going to slide protection that way. But DJ Reader is no slouch as a pass rusher. Aleem showed it last year that he's absolutely no slouch as a pass rusher. Josh Pascal, when healthy, gets to the quarterback. Like there's guys, and not to mention you factor in an Aaron Glenn that is absolutely fine with sending the house or putting together these exotic blitz packages. The addition of one player combined with a great talent in Aidan Hutchinson really does kind of unlock things for this defense. Oh, and we've got to mention the fact that the Lions also invested in another D-line coach, a D-line coach in Terrell Williams, who was seen as like the guy at that position. How much that not only helps Aidan Hutchinson, but every other defensive lineman that can now, again, focus on a specific task, a specific job, and be better at it to open up doors for each other.
Mm-hmm. And the one thing that Terrell Williams keeps on talking about, I think the word that has become synonymous with him is violence, and all the
Mm-hmm.
talk about violent hands and just being a player who's ready to beat the hands and beat the man, right? Is the turn of phrase. So we just talked about Aidan Hutchinson developing a pass rush plan, refining his game in that aspect. Enter a guy like Terrell Williams, and I can only imagine that if Hutch is going to be a sponge around him, we very well could be in for a career year for Aidan Hutchinson,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to be awesome for this Detroit Lions defense.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, whether it's Aiden going from 11 and a half sacks to 15 and a half sacks or something like that, or again, just him being consistent, we saw what that level of play did with him playing at that level. It now can translate to other guys of, hey, how does Aleem take his game to the next level? You've added a DJ Reader. You've added a Carlton Davis in the secondary. You've added a Terrion Arnold in the secondary.
Mm-hmm.
What does this defense start to look like when you have more playmakers at every single level? Does the job for Aidan Hutchinson become better to where, again, we may see we could very well see an uptick in his statistical production. But at the same time, like to your point, we know what Hutch's superpower is, and that's one thing that I think fans should always be reliant on. Like, that guy is going to show up week in, week out.
Absolutely.
So, dude, I appreciate you coming on and having this conversation with me. I'm glad that we were able to pick this up from the last time we talked, and to be able to, again, I don't mean to paint it as like all fans feel this way, but there's always a contingent of fans, and rightfully so. I don't want this also to come across that you shouldn't have expectations for players to improve. But I do think for certain players, there becomes this astronomical projection of like, well, they have to get to this level. Aiden was a Pro Bowler last year. He has to get to all pro status this year. He doesn't have to.
Right. Jameson Williams was the 12th overall pick. He doesn't need to catch 100 passes next year to be effective.
Right. They just need to, like we were saying earlier, right, do their job at the highest level possible that helps this team win. And if that turns into awards, awesome. But at the end of the day, Dan Campbell, his coaching staff, these players, they're in it for championships, not necessarily just for individual accolades. So definitely appreciate you going through this entire conversation with me. Great points made across the board. If you guys want to continue to see great content like this, or even read great content like this, head over to prideofdetroit.com. Like I've said plenty of times before, we are always uploading brand new articles every single day over on the website. And over here on the YouTube channel, we are typically uploading new videos 2 to 3 times a week. So go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell, and be sure to stay tuned to all the content that we are creating over here on the YouTube channel. So with all that said, I'm Meko. He's Ryan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.